Hello and welcome back to another episode of They Don't Teach Us in Law School. I'm your host, Charley Mann of Law Firm Alchemy and Red Kraken Creative, and I am truly thrilled to be talking with my guest today. I mean, I've known him for a long time. I can recall conversations at event hallways where he was telling me how he uses copywriting strategies when he communicates with judges and how it's worked successfully for him. And a lifelong student of marketing, and he's managed to grow this incredible criminal defense and personal injury practice across New Jersey, New York. He still plays basketball to this day. He's an example of living a really full life, being a good father, good husband, or at least as good as he tries to be.
Yes.
And we'll have some fun with that. And I am so thrilled to have my friend on the podcast, Steven Goldstein. Steven, welcome to the show.
Charley, thank you. After begging you for years and years, you finally put me on. I'm so honored. I am honored. I thought you didn't like me, but now I feel good.
Hardly.
I feel good.
Hardly. All right, Steven, the question. What's the one thing they don't teach you in law school?
I thought long and hard about this. And I almost was going to say, forget about the first day of law school. But the minute you get your completed acceptance letter, somebody should tell you, you are about to enter the sales field like you never thought before. Like you think you're about to become a lawyer, you are about to become a salesperson. And you better start thinking like that from day one. And from day one of law school, your first thought should be, I am here to learn how to get my own clients. And I was lucky enough that I had a grandfather who was an entrepreneur. That's the advice he gave me when I told him I was going to law school. And he was like a Damon Runyon-esque type of guy. And he was a serial entrepreneur, way ahead of his time. And he said to me, the worst thing you could ever get in life is a job. It's the least stable thing in the world you could ever do. He said, now that you're going to law school, you must start thinking about getting your own clients. I don't think he used the word clients. I think that was above his, but he gave me that idea from day one. And I was lucky because that was my mindset going in. When I started law school, it was, if I have to get a job, it's going to be for a very short amount of time. Just enough that I can learn a little bit, enough, as they say, like in karate, I had to learn enough just to get my ass kicked. I had to learn that much. And then I had to go make a go. And that to me is so important. And it's never mentioned in law school because, as you know, you, of course, over your career, have seen many people who they just kind of hate the whole sales thing and they don't think of themselves as salespeople. And someone like me is thankful that more lawyers than not don't think of themselves as salespeople, or else who knows where I'd be today. And
so did you start that kind of like practice of being a sales? Did you take your grandfather's advice and really implement it earlier? Did it kind of catch up with you more later on?
So I'll tell you a little bit about my journey to law school.
Please.
When I graduated college, and I was young, I had just turned 21, and I saw all my friends were applying and going to law school right out of college. And I said to myself, whether smartly or stupidly, these people are just going to law school because they have no idea what else to do, and they think it's just going to be another 3 years of partying. So they're going to go to law school. And I said, you know what? I am not going to do that. And I knew that I had my sort of, I wouldn't say my work ethic limitations, but, it's 4 years of college. I'm not getting up at 6:30 in the morning every day and, being disciplined about college. I did what most people do. I partied, I drank, I did whatever, and I did
Me too.
okay. But I said to myself, I was like, you know what? You really need to learn how to work. And you need to learn how to get up in the morning and go to a job and have a job. So I had a number of jobs, sales. Now, I'd always wanted to go to law school, but I said, you know what? I'm like 21 years old. If I go now and I graduate, I'm 24. What the hell do I know? So I went out and I got jobs. I sold I tried real estate. I was selling for the Better Business Bureau. And my father sold life insurance. And my brother was working in the garment center. So like sales was in the family. And again, my grandfather was an entrepreneur. And I did that. And then I got myself into public relations and advertising, which is a different form of sales. I then, at the age of 23, because I was able to type 90 words a minute with no mistakes, and back in the 80s, this made you a superstar.
Yeah.
I was able to talk my way into a job at Madison Square Garden. So, I grew up in Brooklyn, and for a kid like me who played basketball, did every sport, I was a typical Brooklyn kid, go hang out at the schoolyard, play ball all day, go home for dinner, leave again. And I was now working in Madison Square Garden in the boxing department, assisting the head of the boxing department. And my first day of my job in Madison Square Garden, I get a call from the CEO, who at that time his name was Alan Fields. And he goes, "Is this Steven Goldstein?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I recognized his voice. I mean, this is the CEO of Madison Square Garden is calling me. And I'm like a nothing. I'm like a gopher, a typist, basically. And it's like, "I hear you play basketball." I'm like, "Yeah, I play." He goes, "Bring your stuff tomorrow at 1:30. We're playing." Now, when you're playing in Madison Square Garden. You're not going to a junior high school. You're going into the arena. And this is in the 80s when the Knicks had Mark Jackson, Patrick Ewing, Oakley, if you're a basketball fan. I go to my boss. I'm like, "Alan Fields just called me and told me to bring my stuff to play basketball tomorrow. Like, what do I do?" He's like, "You bring your stuff and you go play basketball tomorrow."
Yes,
I said,
yes.
"Okay." So that lasted about 3.5 to 4 years, that job. And it was the greatest job. It was great, but I got to a point now where you're not really making much money. And I really wasn't a corporate person. And I mean, I had gone to a million concerts, so I had the all access pass. So I could finish my day of work at 6:30, walk upstairs, watch the first quarter of the Knick game, a first period of a Ranger game, go to a concert for 25 minutes, and just get on the train and go home. And I'd be able to go backstage. So it was a great job in my early 20s. But I had also had the experience of, after that job, I then moved briefly at an ad agency that did pharmaceutical advertising. And one day I'm there, and in the corner offices are the three head people, the CEO, the CFO, and whatever the other title is. And somebody walks in that nobody has ever seen before. And he basically goes to each one of them, "You're out, you're out, you're out." That evening, I got my application for the LSAT. I said, "Okay, now it's time. I've got like 4 or 5 years of work experience in. I know what it's like to have a job. I know what it's like." And I started law school, I think, turning 26. And I did it in 2.5 years. And I treated it as a job, not as a school. So I was there every day at 8 o'clock, even if I didn't have a class. I was there 8 to 6 every single day, Monday to Friday, never worked a weekend, never did a thing on the weekend. That was my job. And I wound up doing well. And that kind of started me on my career.
Wow. That is so cool. So when you started your career as a lawyer, did you go and work in someone else's firm? How long was it before you started your own practice?
So what I did is I then had, friends' fathers, obviously, were lawyers. And every one of them said, "If you learn how to try a case, you'll always have a job." So I was lucky enough. So this is like, it was in the early 90s and the job market was tough. And I went to New York Law School, not NYU, which everyone says, "Oh, NYU." And I said, if I went to NYU, I probably would have had a horrible career because I would have gotten sucked into one of those big corporate law firm jobs. So, nobody wanted to hire people from, my school, unless you were in the top 10%. I was very lucky. I got a job with AIG defending PI cases. In New York in those days, literally, you were in court every single day. So the minute I passed the bar, I went to the partner and I was like, "I want to try cases." And back then, which was great for a young lawyer, the minimum policies in New York were $10,000. So the defense side was, who really cares if we lose a trial? It's $10,000. So I immediately started trying cases. I mean, and I was getting my ass kicked because I didn't know what I was doing, but at least I was learning on somebody else's dime. And then, because I knew the path I was eventually going to choose, I was really studying the plaintiff's lawyers. And, there were a lot of good young ones who were in the same position as me on the other side. The plaintiff's firms would say, "Okay, we'll let the young guy try the 1020 case because if he loses, who cares?" So you had two lawyers who didn't know anything, and you had each of their firms saying, "Who really cares if they win or lose?" But there were some really good. They had like maybe 5 years experience on me. I learned, and then I started sucking it up, and I did, I started the beginning of my education where I started to learning to love just learning. So I would go to any trial course I could go to, and I got very comfortable trying a case. And it was at that point I had a little, I had left that firm, went to a commercial litigation firm in New Jersey. Now, I had lived in New Jersey, but I was still a New York guy. And I was there for 6 months, and I'm looking at a real estate lease. And I wasn't doing a lot of litigation, and I'm out in Morristown, New Jersey, which is beautiful. But I'm looking at a real estate lease, and I'm looking out my window, and a deer walks under my window. And I won't use the F word, but the first thought in my head was, what the F are you doing here? Like, what are you doing? Like, get out of here. And so I said, all right, this is not me. I need to be, I like being in the country, like on weekends, but this is not me. And if we had enough time, I'd tell you the story about how I met the guy I eventually worked for. But I started looking for a job in the city, and another lawyer had said, this guy is an older guy. He's looking to wind down his practice. He's looking for somebody to work for him. And he got about 150 resumes, and he spoke to me. And I kind of let him know. I said, look, I'll obviously do the work, but you need to know that I want to eventually build my own thing. Like, if now I'm making the move here, I want to build my own thing. And his eyes lit up, because every single person that he had interviewed just wanted to be a worker bee. And he said to me, he said, well, I want you to work for me, but here's the job offer. Here's the salary structure. First year, you're going to make a $50,000 salary. Second year, you're going to make a $40,000 salary. The third year, you're going to make a $25,000 salary. And in the fourth year, you ain't making any salary. And I said, that sounds fantastic, because it sounds to me like you're going to try and make it up on the other side. And he said, yes. And we will work on percentages going in the opposite direction. And I was excited. My wife wasn't. Had just, gotten married. And I said to her, I was like, look, I'm confident. This is what I love to do. Like, I want to hustle. And within 2 years of this arrangement, well, first of all, in the first year, I gave myself a salary cut. After 6 months, I said to him, cut my salary 10 grand. I want X percent of the fees. And he said, great. Because he was rest in peace. He passed away, about 10 years ago. But he was right, like out of a B. He was out of if you were going to have the classic 1970s Jewish plaintiff's personal injury lawyer who was afraid of his own shadow, afraid to spend a dime on a case, afraid to litigate. That was him. Like, if he knew he had to go to trial, the file would go in the corner. He didn't want to spend money. He just wanted to get a case, settle it. If it required any litigation that required any expense. And I said to him, I was like, I'll start. I didn't have the money, but I said, I'll start fronting the expenses, but I'm getting a much bigger percentage. And I looked at his inventory, and I was like, oh, this guy's settling $100,000 cases for $15,000 because he's afraid to try a case. In the first year, I made $100,000 on that arrangement. The second year, I made about $150,000.
There you go.
After about 2.5 years, I had a bigger practice than he did. And he came into me. He was about in his he was kind of like where I am right now. You and I could talk about this privately. He was where I am at right now. And he's like, I'm going to Florida for 6 months. And I said, have at it. And he never worked a full year again. After 2 years, he's like, I'm out of here. I said, great. And we worked out a percentage deal. For 5 years, I paid him out on cases that he had his own or whatever I brought in. He made more money in those 5 years. He made more money in the first year that he was getting money from me than he ever made in his career, because I had now brought in my partner, Ed McGowan, one of my best friend in law school. And Ed is probably the greatest criminal trial lawyer I've ever seen, but he's just a great, and up your alley, Charlie, he was a working Broadway actor for 10 years before he went to law school. So can imagine how he was ridiculous in front of a jury. He was a literal Broadway performer who went to law
That's so
school.
cool.
He is now the head of New York Legal Aid Society in New York City, in Manhattan.
Cool.
So he tries the craziest criminal cases. So the first week, him and I started when Gerald Miller left on a trip and fall case. And this is now, this is like 1995, 94. He hits for $1 million on a trip and fall case with a fractured ankle. Now, it was in the Bronx, so people who know New York know, okay, it's the Bronx, so you got to give it that kind of, it's good, but it's not like trying the case in Virginia and hitting for $1 million, or trying it in the Midwest, so in the South. This is the Bronx, so they were giving away $1 million for a bulging disc with 2 months of treatment, but he still, for $1 million, and that started us off, and that's kind of what my journey was to, I wouldn't say to where, obviously a lot of other things happened, but that was the beginning. And it really set the mindset that I have now, as far as, I'm glad that my grandfather drilled it in me, because I think I would have been a terrible lawyer working for somebody else, because it's not my skill set. I mean, I think I'm a good lawyer, but I learned very quickly. One of the lessons I learned, Ed and I got together, right? Him and I had tried a case in federal court against another guy out of Central Casting, and I'll never forget, his name was Leo McAvoy. So this is probably in the early 90s. Leo, so back then in New York, the classic it was basically the plaintiff's lawyers were the Jewish people, and the defense lawyers were all the Irish people. So Leo was the classic defense lawyer. Leo was the guy who every day at lunch would go out and have 2 or 3 drinks. Leo was the guy every day after court. During the trial, he would take Ed and I out for drinks and pay every day. And we would talk about the case.
Right.
He said a couple of things to me that have stayed with me to this day. And the one thing he said to me, he said, Steve, and I think we were talking about, how do you get clients or whatever. And he's like, you can't be everybody's lawyer. And it really resonated with me, because sometimes as a plaintiff's lawyer, we get caught up in these, I wouldn't even say competition. We get caught up in the ego of, he's got 400 cases, I got 200. Why does he have 400 and I have 2? Why has Morgan and Morgan got 1 million cases? And it so relieves you of the pressure when you and what it does is, again, it set me up for the mindset of referring cases out. So I got very comfortable with, if there was a case that was not in my wheelhouse, it goes to somebody else and let them deal with it, especially, products liability, med mal from the get-go. And I've gotten some nice referral fees off of med mal cases that I was smart enough to take the phone call. And the first thing I'd say to the person is, I'm giving my friend your phone number. I didn't even want to know anything. As soon as they said medical malpractice, I've got a great guy. The other thing he did for me is, and this is more on the legal side, maybe not for the show, but for people who listen and try cases.
So a lot of people.
During the trial, he would object at the weirdest times. So like, I would ask the doctor, and I remember he did this to me, and I said, so doctor, do you have an opinion as to whether this person, what type of injury they suffered and whether it was permanent? And he gets up and he objection. And this is in federal court now. So this is like one of my first trials in federal court. And the judge looks at him like, what are you, crazy? He gives whatever, I forget the reason, but of course The judge overruled him and answers the question. So we're out that night. We're having our drinks that night. And I was like, Leo, like, what the heck is going, like, why did you object to that question? I was like, I don't know what else I could have asked. He goes, Steve, if you hear a question and the answer is going to be bad for you, you stand up, you make an objection, and then you just make up whatever crap comes out of your mouth to justify making the objection. And that's another lesson I still do carry with me. I will make objections when I shouldn't, just because I know the answer may be bad.
Just to disrupt the moment.
Just to disrupt the rhythm, I didn't understand the psychology, but Leo had been trying cases for 35 years at that point. Like, he was he was a grizzled veteran, but he was I mean, still to today, I still talk about him. And you're talking, this probably was in 1994 or five. I think he passed away 20 years ago. But he had a big impact on my outlook. And he was a career defense guy. Made a nice living, but guy had to try at least 400 cases, I would imagine, in his career, because that's all he did was try cases. So I got to learn from people like that. And I thankfully get along very well with my adversaries. I very rarely have a problem. And when you're a younger lawyer and you have a really good adversary, what a great way to learn. And it doesn't really happen as much today because with Zoom and stuff, you really don't get to get the personal relationship you have with your adversary like you did back then. And back then, really, I mean, older guys, and it was mostly guys, older guys would, if they liked you, didn't matter which side they were on, they would like take you under their wing a little bit. If they thought you were a straight shooter and you were, and I was always the guy, I'd give them whatever they want. You want this authorization, I don't care. You want my client's authorization from their third grade transcript, I don't care. Just do it. They appreciated it, because I also had a lot of empathy for them, having been a defense lawyer. I know how it could be a miserable existence, and it could be quadruply miserable if you've got a plaintiff's lawyer who's really busting your hump. So I made it, and again, to this day, one of the things I live by is I'll never make another lawyer do unnecessary work. So I'll dismiss, like if I got three parties in a case and the lawyer comes to me with proof that my person shouldn't be in, I won't make them waste their time making a motion unless they say to me, Steve, I need some billing hours. So let me make the motion. And I'll do that too. In my younger day, when my friends were associates at defense firms and they didn't have enough billing and I had cases with them, I'd be like, all right, send me a letter for a medical record. I'll ignore it. And then send me another letter. And then I'll write you a letter back. And then I'll tell you, I'm not giving it to you. And now you make a motion and I'll respond. So you respond. And then we have to go to court and argue it. We'll adjourn it a few times. And, you can get like 20 hours of billing off of the one letter for wanting a medal. But, again, it's another thing they don't teach you in law school. But I really believe as much as you can without prejudicing your own client, you can make the other lawyer look good to who they need to report to. While not, obviously, you're never going to do it to the detriment of your client.
Yes.
But the more you could help them, I'm telling you, I've made hundreds of thousands of dollars extra, I believe.
I'm sure.
These people will go to bat for you. And I'm talking more so on the not great case. Listen, they're not going to give you an extra $1 million. But if you've got a case that's worth $5,000 and now they'll go to bat to get you 15, well, over the course of a 30-something year career, multiply that extra 10, 15 on a case times however many. And I still to this day, do it. And now I'm kind of obviously on the other side. I'm on the back nine of my career, not the front. And I really do try when I have a younger adversary on the other side, whether it's a prosecutor or a defense lawyer. I'll talk them through some stuff. After a deposition, I'll say, you might have wanted to ask this or ask it in this way. I really believe I really believe the lawyers who feel good about themselves, who are comfortable in their own skin, who don't have the egos, even some of the guys with the egos, it's almost your duty to share. And I now share that. Now I've gained the other knowledge, through you and all the other sales, marketing, that other stuff too. And I'm very, very free with it. I have a lawyer in the suite next door and I help them with their marketing and their PI.
Really?
Yeah. And I don't, you know what? It's, I thankfully have an abundance mentality and I have a mentality. You can't be everybody's lawyer. And I also have the idea of what are the odds of the person looking for a personal injury lawyer is going to go somewhere, Google, and it's going to come down to me and them. I don't know, 1,000,000 to 1. However, there is a DWI lawyer in my area, and she is an unbelievable marketer. And I would say at least 15 times, the people that talk to me will be like, okay, it's between you and her name is Rachel. It's between you and Rachel. But she's like a monster marketer, but all she does is DWI. And if the people say to me, I only want somebody who only does DWI, again, she's a good friend. She refers PI cases to me. I'm like, then, you go to Rachel.
There you go.
And again, the sharing and the abundance mentality, I think really, and it's not hard once you do it. And it kind of feels good. As weird as it is to say, to be able to share even with your competition, which I don't believe any of us have any competition. There's only one me, there's only one you. You're in your space. There's a lot of others, but there's only one you. And if somebody's looking for what you bring to the table, that's where they're going. And I am a good case in point to that.
So we opened with this, they don't teach you how to be a salesperson. So you now have decades, Steven, of reps of being a salesperson. So there would be people from the outside who would look at you and say, yeah, he's got all the experience. That's why it's so easy. It's so effortless for him. I'm curious if you could boil down what you think makes you a good salesperson, practice reps or not. What is it that helps you?
First, I'll tell you what I know makes lawyers bad salespeople, because
Great.
especially in the criminal side, I get a lot of criminal cases after people call 5, 6, 7. And the most important thing I would say, especially on the criminal side, I'll talk to that first. You must have empathy and understand that even if you've been doing criminal law for 30 years, and even if it's a minor charge, these people are scared witless. I mean, I don't mean nervous. I don't mean anxious. I'm talking making your pants scared. And you need to talk to them like you really understand that and you really empathize with them. And what I do on my criminal calls, and what a lot of criminal lawyers do, is they take the exact opposite tack. They think to get the money from people, you need to scare the shit out of them, literally. And that's how you're going to get the money. I tell everybody that I talk to for the first time, the only goal I have on this call is to make you feel better after you hang up the phone. Whether you retain me or not, I want you to feel better. And I do try and dive deeper below the surface of the charge. Most lawyers are like, what do you charge with? Oh, okay, I charge $5,000. And you're facing 10 years in state prison. Although they know this person is getting nowhere close to getting a prison sentence. Someone like that, I'll even say, you may not need a lawyer for this case. I would recommend you have one, only because it's, you can self-diagnose. If you're sick, you can go on Google and, you have a fever and you can take, Tylenol and you might feel better. But I'd still recommend you go to the doctor.
That's right.
But, it's as simple as really genuinely caring, not faking it. But, you really feel for how scared they are. On the personal injury side, it's, again, I don't think people care about results as much as we think, because people assume if you've got the law degree that you're competent. Nobody knows how to tell if you're a good lawyer. You've got the degree, you're competent. Nobody, in my entire career, I don't think one client has ever asked me where I went to law school. And I imagine,
right? Isn't that amazing?
Nobody cares. That's like amongst us idiot lawyers. We ask each other, where'd you go to law school? And, it used to be, I guess we were comparing how dumb, in my case, how dumb I was because all these other people went to better schools. But I'll say I might ask it just maybe for networking purposes. Do you know this guy? People want to be heard. And I work on this every day. Sometimes lawyers, believe it or not, we're bad conversationalists. We could be great in front of a jury because nobody's talking back to you. When you're doing your thing in front of a jury, ain't nobody interrupting you. They have to sit there and listen to you. When you're on a sales call for a personal injury case, people are talking back to you, and they're listening almost to see if you're listening. And a lot of times, and I catch myself doing this, we are very much just get to the point, just get to the point, just get to the point. I have learned to just sit and shut up. And I will sit there and listen for 5 minutes, and they will tell me the most innocuous things that have nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
And then I will just say something like, wow, sounds like this really upset you. Now, it doesn't matter what they're telling me. That's my comeback. Wow, it sounds like this was really upsetting to you. And they may now start off again. Yes, yes, yes. And it's like the classic thing. Somebody will talk to you for 10 minutes. You'll say 2 words and they'll say, wow, that was a great conversation. And it's listening. They want to know, that you're listening. They're listening to see if you're listening. And when you do that, you develop you must establish some sort of rapport on the phone call, on an emotional level, not on a professional level. Like literally, it's got to be a little deeper. It's got to be on a human level. And when you do that, they're yours. They're yours. Because thankfully, again, for me, most lawyers are terrible at it. Now, they may be good at it. They're representing you for 3 years. And now you've had time to develop that. And absolutely, the great trial lawyers, even the good ones, that's probably the best skill they need to have. And I think most of the guys or gals who teach it, you have to develop some sort of kinship with the person you're representing. But you got 3 years to do that. On a phone call, you've got 3 minutes, maybe 3 seconds. And that's really what I really try and do. I think I'm a really good salesman. Again, I've learned that I don't have to be the best lawyer to be successful, because I can always hire a much better lawyer to do a deposition for me, to do a trial for me, to do discovery.
That's right.
Whatever it is I need. I could find somebody better than me who likes it more than I do. Now, I love trying cases, but if you told me it's between doing 2 hours worth of sales calls or 2 hours worth of trial, I probably would choose the sales calls. Or a lot of others would choose, obviously most would say, like, you're out of your mind. But
That's right.
That's
right.
That's why we're all ourselves. We're all who we are.
What's interesting, Steven, is as a salesperson who's doing both personal injury and criminal defense, you're seeing both sides of the financial transaction, where you have some people who are essentially being funded by, we'd recognize this from the Dan Kennedy universe, OPM, other people's money, where it's the insurance company's money or the other driver's money or whatever that might be. You're also on the side where the person has to be the actual buyer. They're not borrowing against insurance policy, essentially. Are there any differences between those two sides?
Huge. So on the criminal side, another thing and this is from developing from, I'd say in the last 10 years, I've read many, many more sales books than law books, and courses that I purchased, mostly sales courses.
Mm-hmm.
So in the personal injury side, you really don't need to build the value proposition to what you're doing, because the people aren't paying you unless you get paid. So there, you're really looking to build the social proof of that we're responsive, and that's by trying to get as many Google reviews as you can, being responsive, and again, building the emotional connection at the initial call. On the criminal side, I much more concentrate on building the value proposition, and I kind of work backwards on being results oriented. And what is it that a criminal defendant, somebody calling you with a criminal case, wants? No matter how ridiculous it may sound or how unlikely it could ever be, they're afraid of going to jail. I mean,
yes,
they could be accused of running a stop sign. Am I going to jail?
Absolutely.
And, you've got to take a breath and say, okay, obviously you're either very dumb or don't, but they're not. They don't know. They don't know.
That's exactly right.
And I tell people, here's the pecking order of what is success. No jail, probation, and you go down the line until it's an ultimate dismissal. And then you talk from a results-based sort of, now I don't make promises I can't keep, and of course I never promise an end result, but you have to build the value proposition. Like when people ask me, how much is it? I don't tell them. And what I tell them is, well, let's first look at what we're going to need to do, because every case is different. Because I don't charge the same on every case. I actually do kind of make up my fee after a 10-minute consultation, because I know kind of what's going to happen. And again, invariably, my fee to a lawyer who only does criminal, I'll usually come in at 50% of the fee. Not because I'm cheap, but they will charge somebody $10,000 knowing it'll be 2 hours of work. I won't do that. I will say, look, here's what we're going to do. Here's what's going to have to happen. And, if I was charging you by the hour, and, it's almost like, the people who do info marketing. If I was charging you retail by the hour, the price would be $10,000, blah, blah, blah. And if you're not doing a payment plan, it says, but, because you called me from a local services ad, or because you called me off of Google and you were not a referral, I could do this for you for X, whatever it is. But they don't hear that until I've gone through, and I wouldn't even call it a sales pitch, because it's really a consultation on how I would handle the case. And again, I'm not afraid of giving away the store, because I'm telling them what's got to happen, but obviously they don't know how to do it. So, as lawyers, we could get away with that. You could tell them everything. You could say, I'm going to file a motion to dismiss, and then I'm going to argue it, and then I'm going to do. Now, I've just given them the entire outlay of how a lawyer would handle the case, but they're not going to do it. They've got to hire somebody. And I could pretty much guarantee a lawyer is not spending that much time on the phone with them and not having been retained. And they will not break it down. And then at the end, I say, look, you can hire whoever you want, but you do need a lawyer. I hope it's me, but if it's not, here's my number. Here's my email. If you have questions, no problem. Once in a blue moon, they'll do it. I've definitely gotten some Google reviews off it. I just the other day spent on a sales call more time with, so the client is already in jail. His sister's a lawyer out in Seattle. I spent more time on the phone with her than she has spent with the lawyer that they paid $7,500 to. And she sent me a text literally today, I'm firing them and I'm hiring you.
There you go.
And I basically told her, you hired a really good law firm. And she did. She hired like top law firm for criminal defense in New Jersey. But which would be a whole other topic, is what's my advantage? The case has been there for 2 months and there's been 3 lawyers. With me, as again, this is our private conversation. I'm trying to keep my caseload to a lot less. They get me. So they get me. I have an associate, but she does the work. So I'm free to do that kind of stuff. I developed empathy with her right away. It's a case, it's a sad case. The brother was healthy, had a stroke, and started exposing himself in public. Because as part of the stroke, part of the unfortunate medical side of it is that you lose your impulse control. And they're holding him in jail. And the judge, even when he held him, said, I understand there's a medical condition, but I don't know what else to do. I gave her an idea that the lawyer who she paid didn't. And then we spoke more about it. Now, I didn't know if the other lawyer did. I said, wow, so it sounds like here's what should be happening. She's like, well, that's not happening. And I was like, I'm surprised, because I will tell you flat out, that firm is probably a better criminal defense firm than I am. But again, people judge us as lawyers. They don't know if we're good or not, but they do know if we'll sit on the phone with them and explain something to them. And that's how they judge us. And whether we like it or not, that is 90% of how a client judges you. Not on the, obviously they want good results, but they want to be heard. They want to be loved. That's a whole other issue that I have, but a lot of the people that we represent, especially in the criminal and PI world, are people who are coming from a world where they're not loved, they're not respected, they're not listened to. They may be poorer, not speak the language, new to the country. We as lawyers, again, we take for granted that people sort of give us, their frame of us is kind of, they may not like us, but they will respect us off the bat. We get talked to differently. Just off the bat, just if somebody knows you're a lawyer. These people also get spoken to in a certain way, and not always in a good way.
That's right. Because
of who they are perceived to be. Now, I grew up in Coney Island in a 2-bedroom apartment. So I don't come from I'm better than you background or beginnings. And when I was growing up, literally my dream in life was to be able to leave my house without getting in an elevator. That was it. That was my dream. If I was able to not get in an elevator to go outside, I had made it. So when I got out of college, I made sure the first apartment I got was on the basement, was on the first floor of an apartment building. So I didn't have to get in an elevator to leave the building. Literally, that's what, it's crazy. That's what drove me. And that's really what if there's any secret sauce, I think that's really what it is understand these people are so appreciative when they're listened to and respected. And I will tell almost every one of my criminal, jokingly on the first call, I'll also say to anybody that calls me, I'll say, wow, you don't sound like the type of person who should need a criminal lawyer. And it either gets a laugh or it gets a, you're right, I don't know. Because again, in the criminal game, most of the clients I get are first or second timers. These are not career criminals. Because most career criminals can't afford a lawyer, because they've been criminals. So they've been in jail for a while, so they're not out there working. So it's it's people who are out there, do a dumb thing. They maybe get drunk, do something stupid. They're in the passion of something, they do something dumb. And, they are looking just to be listened to and loved, literally loved and told. And I tell loads of clients that I love them. And I mean it. And even the bad ones, even the ones that are nasty to me by the end. And, this is the Jerry Spence thing is, everybody has somebody who loves them. Charles Manson had somebody who loved him, saw something good in him and said, wow, I love this person. Everybody has it. And one of our jobs as lawyers is to find it. And when you find it, hold on to it. Tell the person that, wow, what I love about you is whatever it is. And, if they're not nice to you, you can say, I love about you is that you're so blunt with me. And, we can have honest conversations. And it softens them up because perhaps nobody's told them they love them in 20 years. Maybe a parent never told them they love. You just don't know.
Yeah.
And that's where I try and comfort. And they don't teach you that in law school either.
No, they don't. And you know what? Very clearly, Steven, we're going to have you back for another episode. I mean, I kind of knew that going in, that this was going to be the first of many.
Oh, we've got a whole slew of stuff I couldn't even get to because
I know, right? I know. Keep it banked because we'll have you back very soon. Before I ask you the final question, if people want to connect with you, get to know you better, what's the best way for them to do that?
So my website is www.ghlaw, GHLAWNY like New York, NJ, New Jersey.com, or my email is Steven G at the same address at GHLAWNYNJ.com. Or they can just call you, Charlie, and you'll give me the message.
And it'll be in the show notes as well. All right, Steven, last little question for you. What are you reading, watching, and listening to these days?
So I am reading a book by Renee Rodriguez called Amplify Your Influence. And the main lesson there, which is I used it in a legal argument, is if somebody asks you a question, you never answer it directly. Now, I may not have done that here too well with you because I was so excited to be here. But what he explains is you need to set the frame before you answer a question. And if you read the book, he gives great examples, but I found him by accident. But the book is fantastic. I would recommend every lawyer read it. And I used it on an argument the other day in court where prosecutor's arguing something, and I said to the judge, I said, Judge, let me frame this and put this in context before I start my argument. And, it was a guy that was going to be held in jail pending trial, and he got released after, beating up his girlfriend in the car, running away from the police, getting into an accident, having just gotten home from jail for 5 years, 2 months before. But I still got him released. That's the book I'm reading. What television show I'm watching?
Yeah, or movie or whatever.
I'm kind of embarrassed. I don't even know. It's like a Netflix series that my wife turned. I am not a television watcher. So I'm more of a YouTube watcher.
Great. Increasingly, that's the answer that I'm getting.
My algorithm is set to Chris Voss and Jeremy Minor. And Voss is the negotiating guy, and Jeremy Minor is the sales guy. And Jeremy Minor is the guy whose sales course I just bought for $2,700. And Chris Voss, every lawyer should know that guy and know that book. And I've probably watched, I would estimate at least 1,000 hours of content on him. If I don't care if he's doing an interview for a third grade podcaster. I am watching him because every single time he says something, I learn something. But the Netflix series, something about being in love, it was with Anna Kendrick was in it. It was really good, actually. My wife didn't like it. It's something about it. It's a Netflix series about love. But can I plug? Not a series. If people want to watch the movie where I played the piano and won my Emmy Award, it's called They Survive Together, and it's on Amazon and Netflix. So if you watch that, you get at the end to see my name because I played a 2-minute piano piece in that movie, and the movie won an Emmy for Best Documentary in 2022 at the New York Film Festival. And then the last thing was, I know it was
listening to.
So Charlie knows because I talked to him. I started taking piano lessons again. And Charlie said, I like the jam bands. I grew up, I like the Dead and Fish and all those. So I've been playing piano a long time, but I started taking lessons now with a classical musician who's teaching me classical music. But what I do is I have my Sonos speaker next to my piano in my house, and I'll put on a concert, and I will just start playing. But there is a band, the Greystones. I'm telling you, people, go find them. They're a bunch of 11-year-olds. They are 11 years old. They are unbelievable.
Check that out.
The Greystones. They're 11 years old. They do cover songs. They do like some Supertramp, Billy Joel, Adele. If you listen to them and close your eyes, you would have no idea these kids are 11. And then you watch the video. They are unbelievable. They are unbelievable.
That's so cool.
Yeah. The Greystones.
That's so cool.
Listen to
the Greystones.
Yes.
I will have to check them out. Oh my goodness. Well, Steven, I know your
daughters will love them because they're your daughter's age, I think, or a little.
That's right. Yeah. So I got to start being aware of that, though. So, Steven, it may have just been the tip of the iceberg, but what a delight to talk with you. Thank you for sharing, your experience, your story, the wisdom you've accumulated, all the stuff that helps make you uniquely you, that I do believe strongly. And you and I have talked about this, that the world needs to hear from people like you, very much you, because it will inspire the next generation to be more connected to the people and not just think that the more legal stuff that I learn, the better that I'll be as a lawyer, because connecting with the client is a huge component of this. So thank you so much for sharing everything that you have shared on this episode.
I had a great time. Thank you, Charlie. And it was good seeing you.
You as well, as always. And we'll talk more soon enough in another episode of They Don't Teach Us in Law School. Until then.
Bye.